Zero Point by Slavoj Zizek is really personal to me because what makes apocalyptic fiction philosophical is its attempt to get to us at our 0 point, so who we are without world. But, there's a real fundamental danger in that very attempt because we put ideological stand-in answers in the way, like fantasy formations, in the way of actually confronting our 0 points. So you get a lot of apocalyptic fiction that says at the end of the day, what we really are down at our core is fathers or tribalists, rugged misanthropes. And these are all ways of shirking back from our 0 points and remaining who we are. Or how a lot of apocalyptic fiction is just a fantasy that helps you cling to your lot in capitalistic daily life all the more. 0 point's a really interesting notion. Zizek defines it as not just the worst things can get, but a downward spiral in which we lack the conceptual footing to analyze our situation, to conceive a way out. But there's more to it than that is clear in both of these works. A 0 point is when the formal structures of society, the way things should be, our psychic structures, these things collapse and fall into each other. And so we get this coinciding of different types of opposites, or this opening up of this traumatic experience, basically. In Where We've Made It Dark, when we take away the world, slowly, carefully, methodically, what that opens us up to is, engaging politics without, collective action being possible anymore. This open engagement, this exposure to violence. Love is another radical exposure without a proper love object, without any, safety of the world in order to which we can be comfortable in our love. But 0 point is less fun. Is less fun than that. And in order to get to the real breaking out of things, liberal fascisms, which comes out tomorrow actually, is more of where we are today and the opening up of being at the 0 point that we've been at. What that exposes us to. Now, one of the 0 points that haunts us here is with the preclusion of politics from global capitalism. We get politics as a return of the repressed in the form of religious fundamentalism. So religious fundamentalism isn't simply reactionary, it's an actual expression of politics in our current era. But this strange coinciding of opposites with religious fundamentalism and actual emancipatory politics, this coinciding isn't that of enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like when we analyze the situation in Afghanistan here in the book, Zizek makes really clear that what a lot of left-leaning people say when they say that it's great that the U.S. was dealt a blow, imperialism was dealt a blow by having to leave Afghanistan, but it's too bad that women are suffering brutally under the Taliban there now. You can't have your cake and eat it too. The reason why U.S. imperialism was dealt such a blow is because of the fundamentalist repression of women. Like the Taliban follows that fantasy through, and that led them to winning in Afghanistan. And conversely, the Afghanis who were not willing to stand and fight for their own country and risk their lives were willing to risk their lives in an attempt to escape the country itself when the U.S. pulled out, with people trying to climb onto planes that were taking off, etc. So that stance is the stance of global capitalism that precludes us from active political engagement, that says there's no country worth losing our lives for. So here, very clearly, the real blow isn't to imperialism, but to women. So that's the thing that has to be rejected outright. And the bad and good of U.S. imperialism did open up the space. It left open the possibility of secular alternatives, an actual political statehood outside of religious fundamentalism. Another 0 point coinciding of opposites here is not just the techno-feudal billionaire class who is transforming the market into just rent, where we don't actually own what we're buying, but the actual coinciding to and the alliance with actual brutal feudalism, like warlords in Sudan primarily, but across the world, where open violence is the active form as well of capitalism, where we're not just hypocritically accepting the violence, but actively engaged with it. But the main 0 point of this book is the horror of live stream genocide in Gaza, and how that attacked analysis itself, the ability to think through our own situation where thought is the most important thing to do. So this is a text that spans about the course of a year, so you're getting the unfolding of this horror as it continued. But at the outset, Zizek was at a talk in Germany, you can see the video, where he was brutally censored and attacked by the people running the event for asserting that we have to reject both Hamas and Israel's bombing of Gaza. it's not a both sidesism. And Zizek's point here is there's a leveling of despair, where we're in a tragic situation. Both sides have a right to live where they're living, not where the other person's living, but where they're living. And so you need coexistence. You need a two-state solution, effectively, even though he's not really using that term. So, the preclusion of that and the despair that brings us to is what we're thinking through here. What Zizek asserts here is the need to create a new world in which you can coexist. So the ways in which things can be that are defining how you have to live right now have to be broken down. And you do this with different types of radicality. So in the conclusion, he says, you penetrate the space of your enemy, and instead of destroying them, you give flowers and fruit and walk back home. You show your openness to a new way things could be there. One point that he really makes as a through line here in 0 points, also in liberal fascisms, is the need to embrace shame in order to assert one's dignity. So the destruction of Gaza brought shame over the entire world, and by clinging to your land that's been destroyed, by openly expressing your despair and dismay, you assert your dignity in the face of those who are shameless with their obscene violence. So that is the one point at which you can resist things when you have nothing left. And the fact that those in power fight this shame shows its efficacy. And the point that we get to with liberal fascisms today is what's even worse is accepting this as pragmatically better, that we have an ethno-state in this idea of greater Israel, which obviously is currently imploding with the Iranian war. Hopefully. There are hard limits that we're getting to globally, obviously. So when we're brought down to this 0 point, this huge, terrible nadir, we aren't feeling sympathy for the people who are out there suffering. Sympathy is a way of keeping the people who are out there suffering out there away from us. What we do is endure our shame, and we bear our shame, make it public. And doing so is what asserts dignity, says that we are more than what we're being reduced to. That's the way out. And from there, we forge out enough space, enough breathing room for us to make tough decisions, pragmatic decisions, ruthless decisions that embetter us somehow, whatever the situation is. That's what we can do. So 0 Point is a tough book to read. It's not, depressing in the sense of like a litany of all the horrible things in the world, even though it's full of horrible things in the world. It's conceptually a difficult book to kind of get through, but it's very much necessary. And liberal fascisms, with its problems of our current era, very much gets us to the opening that being at the 0 point offers. So, very much recommend it.